This lesson looks at a concept briefly covered in the big picture lesson. In that lesson, I showed you how chords can be derived from a scale. Still using that concept, we're now going to look at a more structured way in which we can build entire chord progressions connected to a single parent scale. The system we're about to look at is the backbone of many popular and hit songs. First, I just want to cover the benefits of knowing what we're about to learn, because a lot of people won't immediately see the value in knowing this stuff and switch off as a result. Benefit 1. Your ear will develop the ability to identify certain chord movements and key relationships that you can then transpose to any key. Number 2. You'll know which scale you can use over a given chord sequence, or even the entire progression. And number 3. You'll have the solid foundations to write your own chord progressions. Now we know it's worth our time learning this stuff, let's get to it. Simply put, a chord scale is revealed when you build a chord on each degree of a scale. For example, the major scale has 7 degrees, and we can therefore build 7 chords from that scale, 1 chord rooted on each degree. This gives us a chord system compatible with the scale from which it's built. The major scale is one parent scale in which a chord scale system resides, and that's the example we're going to focus on in this lesson. All we do is build chords on each degree of the major scale to give us our 7 chord scale. You'll often see Roman numerals used to represent these scale degrees. Uppercase numerals for the major chords and lowercase for the minor chords. So if you see a progression written as 1, 4, 5 in Roman numerals, you'll know it's referring to the 1st, 4th and 5th chords of the scale. 2, 5, 1 would be the 2nd, 5th and 1st chords. The numerals allow us to see a relationship of chords without specifying a key, because the interval relationship between the chords, just like the scale's intervals, is the same no matter which key you're in. In a moment, we'll go into what makes a given degrees chord major or minor. This table shows you this chord scale in several keys. You can find the complete table in the lesson on fretjam.com. Find the link below this video. Notice how the first chord in the scale shares the same root as its parent scale, as indicated by the chord letter. This is known as the 1 or tonic chord of the scale. What's great about learning this chord scale system is that if you pull out any combination of chords in a chosen key, the related scale will work over every chord in that sequence. Incidentally, it's also the formula used to write many pop and rock songs. For example, using the scale of G major, if the chord progression was C major, D major, A minor, G major, then the G major scale, whether used for vocals or an instrumental solo, would work over the entire progression because all these chords are part of that scale. In fact, every chord in a given scale uses notes from that parent scale. Since there are 7 notes in the major scale, you have 7 notes from which to build a related chord. Let's use the C major scale for the following example. In the table below, you can see how each degree of the scale builds a new triad, based on how the intervals of that chord fall in the scale. Remember, we build chords from their root notes, so when building a chord on a scale degree, that degree's note becomes the root note of the chord. For example, the root note of C major is C, the root note of D minor is D, the root note of E minor is E. So, why are some chords in the scale major and others minor? The answer is because the intervals of the parent scale dictate whether a major third or a minor third interval can be used from a given degree. Because all these chords use notes from the C major scale, we could theoretically play a C major solo over any combination of these chords, even if C major itself is not in the progression. It's all relative. So how do we visualize all this on the guitar fretboard? There's two ways. The first is to simply build open position chords or bar chords on each degree of the scale. Using C major as our example again, we could lay out the intervals of the scale across the lowest two strings. These two strings give us the bass root notes for the most common bar chord forms, often referred to as the E shape and A shape. So our C major scale root is on the note C, and therefore this is where our tonic chord would be rooted. We have the choice of using an E form bar chord at the 8th fret, an A form bar chord at the 3rd fret, or an open C major form again at the 3rd fret. Continuing from there, D minor as the 2 chord, E minor as the 3 chord, F major as the 4 chord, G major as the 5 chord, A minor as the 6 chord, B diminished as the 7 chord, and then back to C major. The other way of visualizing chord scales on the fretboard is to pull chord shapes right out of the scale pattern. This method gives you a wider selection of chord voicings to choose from. This is the method covered in the big picture lesson, and it's also covered in the lesson on the site. So that's the basic concept behind chord scales. Many songs use chord progressions built from the major scale in this way. Here are some typical examples using C major as the parent scale. Remember, even minor key progressions can be built from this parent major scale. The most common minor key progressions resolve around the 6th chord, also known as the relative minor of the major tonic. In C major, the relative minor tonic would be A minor. Don't forget you can also change between relative major and minor keys in the same song. Now, we've only been using triads as an example so far, but in a later part we'll look at how we can build seventh and extended chords from the same scale. We'll also look at how we can build chord scales from the harmonic minor and melodic minor scales. However, if you've managed to grasp what was covered in this lesson, you should be able to apply it to any other scale you know independently. Cheers.